This is Station Ojos de Sal, Operator Hertz speaking into the void. The current time is 400 hours, though time feels irrelevant when the landscape is a perpetual white sheet. The internal thermometer of the container reads 12 degrees below 0 Celsius. I can see my breath condensing in front of the radio stack, forming small clouds that dissipate over the warm vacuum tubes of the transmitter. I am sitting in the modified cargo container that serves as my hull against the world. The walls are lined with lead and copper mesh to shield against the solar radiation, but they do nothing to stop the cold. It seeps through the floor, a relentless physical weight that makes my joints stiffen. I have just completed the hourly frequency sweep. The silence on the bands is heavy, punctuated only by the crackle of atmospheric static which sounds like grease frying in a distant pan. My hands are wrapped in fingerless wool gloves, allowing me the dexterity to adjust the fine-tuning knobs while keeping frostbite at bay. My equipment is running hot, which is the only reason the air in this immediate corner is breathable. I rely on vintage technology here, valves and vacuum tubes salvaged from military surplus dumps years ago. Modern silicon chips and solid-state circuits are useless now. The recurrent solar flares fry them instantly. These old tubes, however, are resilient. They glow with a dull orange warmth, humming a low-frequency vibration that I can feel in my teeth. The smell here is distinct. It is a mixture of ozone generated by the high-voltage transformers and the pervasive metallic scent of the salt dust that manages to infiltrate every seal. I have to be careful with the gain controls. If I push the signal too hard, the tubes overheat. If I keep it too low, the signal dies in the background radiation. It is a constant balancing act, requiring a steady hand and an ear trained to distinguish between the random noise of the sun and the intentional rhythm of a human transmission. Outside, the environment is hostile in a way that is difficult to describe to anyone who hasn't stood on the salar. It is not just a desert, it is a flat, crystalline expanse of salt that stretches to the curvature of the earth. During the day, the albedo effect is blinding, reflecting nearly all UV radiation back up. Without heavy-tinted goggles, retinal burn occurs in minutes. Right now, in the pre-dawn darkness, the salt acts as a massive thermal sink, sucking the heat out of everything. The wind carries microcrystals of salt that act like sandpaper. I can hear the abrasion against the outer steel of the container. It is a scratching sound, continuous and rhythmic, eroding the paint and seeking out the raw metal underneath to begin the oxidation process. The isolation here is absolute. There is no cover, no trees, no terrain features, just the infinite flat plain. This provides excellent line of sight for radio propagation, but it also means I am visible for miles. My routine is dictated by the voltage meter on the primary battery bank. I check it every 20 minutes. It is a compulsion I cannot shake, a remnant of my training and perhaps a symptom of the stress. The needle must stay above 24.5 volts.
If it drops below that, the chemical reaction in the deep cycle lead-acid batteries begins to degrade the plates permanently. I tap the glass of the gauge twice with my fingernail before reading it, a superstitious habit I have developed. The bank consists of 12 heavy units wired in series parallel. They are old, swollen from years of improper charging cycles before I acquired them. I worry about the structural integrity of the casings.
If one cracks, the sulfuric acid will leak into the enclosed space of the bunker. I keep a bucket of baking soda nearby to neutralize a spill, but the fumes alone in this ventilation pore box would likely incapacitate me before I could react. I have to initiate the morning maintenance protocol for the external antenna array. This requires exiting the airlock. I zip up my thermal suit, checking the seals around the neck and wrists. The wind outside is currently gusting at 30 knots. The antenna is a dipole configuration, strung between the top of my container and a cemented post 50 meters out. The problem is the salt accumulation. The moisture in the air binds the salt dust to the copper wire, creating a conductive crust that alters the impedance of the antenna. This mismatch causes the radio waves to reflect back into the transmitter instead of radiating out, which could blow the final output tubes. I have to manually scrape the wire. I grab a customized tool, a PVC pipe with a notch cut into it, and prepare to brave the exposure. The transition from the container to the outside is a physical shock. The temperature drop hits my lungs like inhaling crushed glass. Returning inside, the process of repressurization and decontamination is tedious but vital. I brush off every grain of salt from my outer layer before stripping down. If that salt gets into the radio chassis, it will bridge circuits and cause a short. I sit back at the console and check the standing wave ratio, SWR. It has dropped back to an acceptable level of 1.2.1 following the cleaning. The efficiency is restored. I pour myself a ration of water. My hydration system is another point of failure I monitor closely. I use a scavenged reverse osmosis pump to pull brine from beneath the salt crust and purify it. The membranes are clogging faster than anticipated. The water today has a slight brackish aftertaste, indicating that the filter integrity is compromised. I will have to backwash the system later, which consumes precious power. But kidney failure is a slower, more painful death than exposure. The primary objective of this station is to maintain the ghost network. I am a relay node. Smaller resistance pockets in the Andes and the Amazon do not have the power to transmit long distances. They send short burst encoded messages to me via ground wave, and I retransmit them via skywave propagation to other listening posts across the continent. It is a thankless job. I rarely know what the messages contain, as I do not possess the decryption keys for all groups. I am simply a mirror, bouncing light in the dark. I do this because of the silence I caused years ago. When the grid first went down, I hoarded bandwidth for a data backup protocol instead of broadcasting the flood warning to the valley below. I verify the logs now. 3 packets received from Sector 7 in the last 6 hours. I queue them up for retransmission on the 40-meter band, adjusting the frequency slightly to avoid the solar interference. I am tracking a signal anomaly on 7.025 MHz. It is distinct from the atmospheric noise. Most interference sounds like a wash of white noise or a rhythmic buzzing from the ionosphere. This sound is different. It is a breathing pattern. It sounds like a carrier wave that is being modulated by an open microphone in a room with a heavy draft. It appears every night at roughly 0300 hours and fades by dawn. I call it the lung. It gives me no coordinates, no identification code. It just breathes. Technically, it could be a transmitter left on with a stuck key, but the frequency drift suggests someone is actively tuning it to stay clear of interference. I have tried to triangulate it, but the signal is too weak and bounces erratically off the ionosphere. It adds a layer of psychological tension to the shift, a ghostly presence in the headset that implies I am being listened to, or that someone is waiting for me to speak first. Power management is becoming critical as the winter solstice approaches. The solar array on the roof is operating at 60% efficiency. The panels are etched by the wind-blown salt, making the glass opaque and scattering the sunlight before it hits the photovoltaic cells. I have to polish them with a compound I make from toothpaste and oil, but it is a losing battle against the abrasion. Yesterday, the charge controller initiated a disconnect because the voltage from the panels spiked erratically, likely a loose connection caused by thermal contraction. The metal shrinks in the cold and expands in the heat. Over time, this loosens every screw and bolt in the system. I spent 2 hours tightening terminal blocks with a screwdriver that felt like an icicle in my hand. My knuckles are cracked and bleeding. The dry air prevents the skin from healing, leaving open fissures that sting when I touch metal. I have deployed a perimeter defense system, but it is not visual. Visual confirmation is unreliable here due to the mirages. Instead, I use seismic acoustics. The salt crust of the salar is hard and resonant, like a giant drumhead. I have buried piezoelectric sensors, elements harvested from old electric lighters and buzzers, in a circle 500 meters out. These are wired back to the bunker and connected to an oscilloscope. I don't look for intruders, I listen for them. A footstep on the salt creates a specific sharp spike on the display, a high-frequency crunch. A vehicle creates a lower rolling sine wave. This morning, the scope showed a disturbance in the northwest quadrant. The waveform was irregular, not the rhythmic gait of a human, nor the roll of a tire. It might have been a stress fracture in the salt plate itself, expanding in the sun. I am logging it as unverified event 404. The food situation is stable but grim. I am eating from a stockpile of canned sardines and peaches dating back 5 years. The expiration dates are meaningless. I inspect the cans for bulging, which would indicate botulism. If the can is flat, I eat. The diet is high in sodium, which is ironic given my location, but bad for my dehydration levels. I eat cold to save the propane for the soldering iron. The act of eating is mechanical. I do not taste the food. I calculate the caloric intake, 1,200 calories to maintain body heat and cognitive function. I eat slowly, staring at the radio dials. The boredom is a threat. It leads to complacency. To counter it, I disassemble and reassemble my backup handgun, a .38 revolver, blindfolded. It is a tactile exercise to keep my fingers nimble and my mind focused on the mechanics of the weapon. La Llorona is active again tonight. This is a separate signal from the lung. It is an automated transmission on the upper sideband. A female voice, digitized and degraded, reciting coordinates that change every 48 hours. Today, she is crying out numbers that correspond to a location in the Atacama Desert. The signal is strong, 5 by 9 on the meter, which means the transmitter is powerful. I suspect it is a trap, a lure set by the scavenging gangs to draw desperate survivors into a kill zone. The crying sounds looped, artificial. I have marked the frequency as hostile on my chart. I never acknowledge it. To transmit on that frequency would be suicide. The discipline required to stay silent when hearing a human voice, even a fake one, is immense. It triggers a deep, instinctual desire to connect, which I must suppress with logic. The wind has shifted direction, now coming from the south. This brings a drop in temperature, but clears the air of the fine salt dust for a few hours. I take this opportunity to inspect the grounding system. A good earth ground is essential for radio operation, but getting a ground connection in a salt flat is nearly impossible because salt is a poor conductor. I have driven long copper rods deep into the brine layer beneath the crust. I check the resistance with a multimeter. It reads 20 ohms, high but workable. If the ground fails, the chassis of the radio becomes hot with RF energy. Touching the microphone would burn my lips with radio frequency current. I pour a bucket of wastewater over the ground rods to improve the conductivity. The water hisses as it hits the frozen earth, instantly creating a slush that seals the connection. I am reviewing the signal logs from the previous week to identify patterns. I use a pencil and graph paper to plot the times of interception. There is a cluster of activity on the 20-meter band between 1400 and 1600 hours. This coincides with the time of maximum solar ionization, allowing signals to travel furthest. The traffic is encrypted. Fast bursts of data that sound like a zipper being pulled up quickly. This is military-grade tech. It is not the clumsy amplitude modulation of the raiders. Someone organized is operating out there. I have been recording these bursts onto magnetic tape. I play them back at half speed, trying to find a preamble or a header I recognize. It sounds like a digital handshake protocol. If there is a remnant of the old government or a foreign entity scanning the continent, I need to know if they are friend or foe before they triangulate my position. The isolation of the bunker creates a unique acoustic environment. Inside, the dominant sound is the hum of the transformer and the white noise of the radio.
Outside, the wind howls through the gaps in the plating, creating a harmonic resonance that sounds like a cello being bowed poorly. I have learned to filter these sounds out. However, any new sound triggers an adrenaline spike. A few minutes ago, a metal panel on the roof contracted with a loud bang due to the temperature change. My heart rate jumped to 140 beats per minute instantly. I sat perfectly still for 10 minutes, hand on the revolver, watching the seismic scope.
The line remained flat. False alarm. The stress of constant vigilance releases cortisol, which eats away at muscle mass. I have to force myself to do isometric exercises against the wall to keep my strength up. Atmospheric conditions are deteriorating. The barometer on the wall is dropping rapidly. A storm is forming over the Andes and rolling down towards the plateau. Electrical storms here are terrifying. There is no lightning rod higher than my antenna for 50 miles. I have to decide whether to disconnect the antenna to save the rig or stay on air to catch emergency traffic. The static on the receiver is building, a crescendo of crashes and pops. I can hear the approaching wavefront in the RF spectrum before I can see the clouds. It sounds like gravel being poured onto a tin roof. I decide to engage the grounding switch, diverting the antenna input directly to Earth. It renders me deaf to the world, but it prevents a lightning strike from vaporizing my equipment. I sit in the radio silence, listening to the physical wind batter the container. The sensory deprivation of the storm is disorienting. With the shutters closed and the radio disconnected, my world shrinks to the 4 meters of the container. I use this time to service the generator. It is a small diesel unit, strictly for emergencies when the solar bank fails. I have a limited supply of fuel, perhaps 50 liters stored in jerry cans. The fuel degrades over time, It turns into a varnish that clogs the carburetor. I filter a liter through a piece of cloth to check for sediment. The smell of diesel is comforting. It smells like mechanical reliability. I turn the engine over by hand a few times to keep the pistons free, but I do not start it. The noise would travel too far in this acoustic emptiness. Starting the generator is a beacon that announces my position to anyone within 20 kilometers. My hands are shaking slightly today. It is a tremor in the fingers, likely a combination of caffeine withdrawal and low blood sugar. This is dangerous when soldering. I need to repair a connection on the voltage regulator board. The trace on the circuit board has lifted due to heat stress. I have to bridge it with a thin wire. I use a magnifying glass mounted on a stand. The soldering iron tip is pitted and worn. I have to time my breathing. Inhale, exhale, pause, apply solder. The smell of rosin flux fills the air. A momentary lapse in concentration, and I could burn a neighboring capacitor. The repair is ugly, a glob of silver metal instead of a neat cone, but the continuity tester beeps. It works. Functionality over aesthetics is the rule of the wasteland. The seismic system just registered a confirmed contact. It was not a thermal crack. The scope showed 3 distinct rhythmic spikes moving in unison. Step, step, step. Someone is walking on the salt. Based on the amplitude, they are roughly 400 meters out, approaching from the blind side of the container. They are moving slowly, likely struggling with the terrain or trying to be stealthy. I extinguish the internal red light, plunging the cabin into absolute darkness. I put on my headset but keep the volume at 0, using only the visual meter of the oscilloscope. I am not transmitting. I am a hole in the electronic map. I crawl to the periscope, a crude system of mirrors in a PVC pipe that allows me to look out without opening a port. The distortion of the thick glass and the darkness make it hard to see, but I catch a silhouette against the starlight. The silhouette is stationary now. They have stopped. Are they scanning? Listening? If they have a thermal imager, my container will glow like a torch due to the heat of the tubes. But thermal tech is rare and fragile. It is more likely they are navigating by compass. I hold my breath, my own respiration sounding deafening in the confined space. The figure moves again, but they are turning away, veering east. They are missing my position by a few degrees. It is a lone walker. No vehicle support. A refugee? A scout? If I hail them, I save a life. If I hail them, I reveal the cache. The logic of survival dictates silence. I watch the seismic blips fade as they walk away into the void. The guilt is a physical nausea in my stomach, but the radio remains silent. I note the trajectory in the log. Contact 045, bypassed, non-hostile probable. The aftermath of the near encounter leaves me wired. I cannot return to sleep or maintenance. I obsess over the security of the door. It is a heavy marine-grade steel door with 3 deadbolts I machine myself, but the hinges are on the outside, a design flaw of standard shipping containers. I have welded steel plates over them to prevent tampering, but a dedicated attacker with an angle grinder could breach it in 10 minutes. I check the welds for the 100th time, running my fingers over the cold, rough beads of metal. They are solid. The weak point is not the door. It is the ventilation intake. I have a mesh screen there, but poison gas or smoke could easily be pumped in. I keep a gas mask hanging directly above the operating chair. I check the filter canister. It is sealed, but old. Sunrise brings the white out. As the sun crests the horizon, the salt flat illuminates instantly. The transition from dark to blinding light takes seconds. I lower the external blast shields over the viewports. The container heats up rapidly. The thermal expansion creates a series of loud clanks as the metal skin stretches. I monitor the internal temperature. It rises from 12 degrees to plus +5 degrees in an hour. This thermal cycling is brutal on the electronics. Condensation forms on the cold metal surfaces as the air warms up. I have to go around with a rag, wiping down the radio faceplates and the battery terminals. Water is the enemy. A single drop bridging the high-voltage plate supply of the transmitter would cause an arc flash, potentially blinding me or starting a fire. I am preparing a data packet for the Ghost network. Today's report includes meteorological data, barometric pressure trends, and wind vectors, which are crucial for the agricultural enclaves in the valleys to predict frost. I type the message into the burst encoder. It converts my text into a high-speed audio stream. This reduces the transmission time to under a second, minimizing the chance of interception. I wait for the frequency to clear. 7.150 MHz looks quiet. I tune the antenna tuner, matching the impedance. I take a breath, flip the transmit switch, hit the send key on the computer, and immediately kill the power. The radio bursts for 0.8 seconds. Zip. Done. I immediately switch frequencies and wait. If anyone heard that, they heard a static glitch. Only the intended receiver with the decoding software can read it. My physical condition is deteriorating slowly. I have lost weight. My belt is tightened to the last hole. The lack of fresh produce means my gums are sensitive, a sign of early scurvy. I take vitamin supplements from a bottle I raided from a pharmacy ruin years ago, but I don't know if they are still potent. I check my fingernails. They are brittle and ridged. These are the biological indicators of a system running on reserves. I compensate by drinking the brine-processed water, which contains magnesium and lithium from the salt flat. The lithium perhaps helps with the mood swings, keeping the panic at a manageable level. I am a biological machine servicing electronic machines. Both of us are rusting. I need to calibrate the seismic sensors. The salt crust shifts over time, altering the acoustic coupling. I have to go out and physically stomp on the ground at known distances to create a reference signal. I step out into the blinding noon light. The goggles are heavy on my face. I walk exactly 50 meters north. I jump and land hard on my heels. Thud. I wait. I do it again. Thud. I have to trust that the oscilloscope inside is recording these spikes. This activity exposes me. I am a dark speck on a white canvas. Anyone with binoculars within 10 kilometers can see me. I move quickly, efficiently. I check the wire leads where they enter the salt. The salt is recrystallizing around the wires, slowly crushing them. I have to chip the growth away gently. It is like surgery on a tumor. Back inside, I analyze the calibration data. The sensors on the east quadrant are showing lower sensitivity. The wire insulation might be degrading, leaking signal into the ground. This creates a blind spot. If the buggies come, they will likely come from the east, where the terrain is slightly firmer. I have to prioritize a repair mission for tonight, under the cover of darkness. Working in the dark with a flashlight in my mouth is difficult, but necessary. I mark the location on my mental map. The prospect of leaving the perimeter again raises my heart rate. I check the revolver. 5 rounds in the cylinder, 1 empty chamber under the hammer. Safety first. The radio spectrum is acting up again. The solar flux index is rising. This indicates a solar flare has erupted, and the particles are hitting the upper atmosphere. The radio bands are washing out. Signals that were clear an hour ago are now buried in a roar of cosmic noise. This is the Carrington effect on a microscale. It makes long-distance communication impossible, but it also creates a cloak. The radar's scanners will be useless in this noise. I can move or work without fear of electronic detection. However, the magnetic storm also induces currents in long wires. My antenna could pick up enough charge to shock me. I disconnect the coaxial cables and ground them to the chassis. The sparks jump a millimeter gap, blue and angry. The air in the shack smells heavily of ozone. While the radio is down due to the solar storm, I focus on the mechanical traps. I have positioned tripwires around the immediate perimeter of the container. These are not explosive. Explosives are too valuable. But acoustic warnings. The wires are connected to spring-loaded clappers that strike empty metal cans suspended inside the airlock tunnel. It is a primitive alarm system that requires no electricity. I test the tension. The salt air corrodes the fishing line I use as wire. It snaps easily. I replace a section with braided wire. It is tedious work, tying knots with numb fingers. I have to ensure the tension is just right, tight enough to trigger, loose enough not to snap in the wind. I take a moment to look at the photo taped to the side of the radio stack. It is faded, the colors shifting to magenta. It is a picture of the engineering team from the base, taken before the collapse. I am in the back row, unsmiling. Most of these people are dead. I heard their stations go offline one by one in the first year. Some screamed, some just stopped transmitting. I am the last node of this specific cluster. This photo is my totem. It reminds me why I maintain the discipline. If I stop, the network topology breaks. The pockets of survivors in the south lose their link to the north. I am the bridge. The burden of this purpose is the only thing heavier than the lead shielding in the walls. The sun is setting. The sky turns a bruised purple, then a deep indigo. The temperature plummets. I am preparing for the night shift. The solar storm is subsiding, leaving behind a skip zone where radio waves bounce erratically. This is the most dangerous time. Signals from thousands of miles away can suddenly come in crystal clear, while a station 10 miles away is unheard. I put the headset back on. The foam pads are worn and crumbling. I adjust the volume. The static hisses. I wait. My hand hovers over the tuning dial. The night is when the ghosts speak. I am ready to listen. The temperature inside the container has stabilized at a critical low. I am burning my own caloric reserves to keep warm, shivering violently enough that I have to brace my hands against the desk to solder. I am working on the tuner for the 80-meter band. The coil is wound on a ceramic form, and the spacing between the turns must be precise. The cold has contracted the copper wire, changing the inductance. I have to reheat the wire with a heat gun, powered briefly by the generator, to stretch it back into tolerance. The smell of hot dust and heated copper fills the small space. It is a dry, choking scent. Outside, the wind has died down, which is worse. The silence amplifies the ringing in my ears, a condition called tinnitus, developed from years of listening to high-pitched, heterodyne whistles. I have intercepted a new signal pattern. It is not La Llorona, and it is not the military burst. It is a slow, rhythmic scratching on 3.5 MHz. At first, I thought it was a loose connection in my antenna feed line, scratching against the mast in the wind. But the wind has stopped. The scratching persists. It has a cadence. 3 scratches, pause, 1 scratch, pause. It mimics the friction of something dragging heavy metal across the salt. I cross-reference this with the seismic display. The oscilloscope shows low-frequency tremors coinciding with the radio interference. This suggests a vehicle with a poorly shielded ignition system or a dragging chain is moving within 20 kilometers. The spark plugs of an old engine act as spark gap transmitters, broadcasting wideband noise. Someone is driving out there without radio suppression. I initiate the blackout protocol. This is a standard operating procedure when an unverified signal source gets too close. I kill the main breaker to the transmitter. The hum of the cooling fans dies instantly. The silence in the bunker becomes absolute, heavy like water. I switch to battery-powered LED red lighting to preserve night vision and reduce the electromagnetic signature. The only light comes from the faint glow of the heater filaments in the receiver, which I keep in standby mode. Warm enough to wake up instantly, but not drawing enough current to be easily detected. I sit in the red gloom, watching the signal strength meter on the passive receiver. The needle twitches. They are getting closer. The scratching sound in the headset is louder now, overlaying the background static. The water filtration system requires immediate attention, distraction or not. The pressure gauge on the inlet side is reading 80 psi, which is too high. The membrane is fouled. If I don't backwash it now, the pump head will crack. I have to work in the red light. I disconnect the intake hose. A slurry of brine and salt crystals spills onto the metal floor. I wipe it up frantically with a rag. Salt water on the floor will corrode the steel plating in days. I reverse the flow valves. The pump strains, making a rhythmic thumping sound that feels too loud in the silence. Thump, 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 thump. I wrap the pump in an old wool blanket to dampen the noise. It is a pitiful attempt at stealth, but it is all I have. I watch the clear water trickle into the jerry can. It is agonizingly slow. Dawn breaks with a violent color shift. The sky turns a bruised purple, then a sudden blinding white. The whiteout is more intense today. The atmospheric pressure is dropping so fast my ears pop. The barometer needle is tapping against the bottom stop. This indicates a massive low-pressure system is colliding with the high-altitude dry air. A viento blanco, a white windstorm, is imminent. This is both a curse and a blessing. The storm will blind any visual observers and scramble thermal sensors with flying ice and salt. But it will also bury my solar panels and possibly snap the dipole antenna. I have to make a choice. Go out and lower the antenna, risking exposure to the approaching vehicle, or leave it up and risk the wind tearing it down. I choose to leave the antenna up, but slacken the guy wires from the inside winch. This allows the mast to sway rather than snap. I watch through the periscope. The horizon is dissolving. The sharp line between earth and sky is gone. It is just a wall of white moving towards me. The salt dust cloud is thousands of meters high. The approaching vehicle signal, the scratching noise, is getting lost in the static generated by the storm. The friction of billions of salt particles colliding creates a massive static charge in the air. My radio receiver is now screaming with noise, a roar of S9 plus and 40 dB. It is useless. I am deaf, electronically. I pull the headphones off and hang them around my neck. The static is audible even without them, buzzing in the speaker coils. The storm hits the container like a physical hammer blow. The entire structure shudders on its foundation. The sound is deafening, a continuous roar like a jet engine at takeoff. Sand and salt blast against the steel walls. I can hear the scouring. It sounds like thousands of fingernails scratching the metal. The temperature inside drops 5 degrees in 10 minutes as the wind chill strips the heat away from the hull. I wrap myself in a foil emergency blanket over my wool clothes. I sit in the corner, away from the walls. The isolation is total now. I cannot hear the enemy. I cannot see them. And I cannot communicate. I am a passenger in a steel box, adrift in a hurricane of salt. The seismic sensors are my only remaining eyes. The wind vibrates the ground, creating a chaotic grass pattern on the oscilloscope. But the ground wave of a heavy vehicle is different. It has a lower frequency, a heavy thudding that travels through the bedrock. I filter the input, cutting off everything above 50 hertz. The screen clears. Amidst the noise of the storm, I see it. A rhythmic pulse. Bump, bump, bump. It is faint, but consistent. They are not 20 kilometers away anymore. They are 5. And they are not stopping. The storm is providing them cover. They know the terrain. They are navigating by GPS or inertial reckoning. They are coming for the island. I check the defensive measures. My perimeter trap, the piezoelectric tripwires, will be useless in this wind. The vibration of the wire itself will trigger false alarms. I have to rely on the dead man's switch. I have a bank of capacitors scavenged from old microwave ovens and defibrillators. I have wired them in parallel to the outer skin of the door handle. If I flip the toggle, 2,000 volts will dump into the handle. It won't kill instantly, but it will stop a heart or fuse the muscles of a hand, preventing them from letting go. I charge the bank. The high-pitched whine of the charging circuit is piercing. It takes 3 minutes to reach full capacity. I watch the neon ready light flicker on. The trap is set. The air inside the bunker feels electric. The static charge from the storm is leaking inside. I get a small shock every time I touch the metal chassis of the radio. My hair on my arms is standing up. The smell of ozone is overpowering. It smells like a photocopier room, sharp and chemical. This is dangerous. If the potential difference between the inside and outside gets too high, St. Elmo's fire could form on the antenna tips, acting as a beacon. I check the grounding strap. It is hot to the touch. The earth is soaking up the atmospheric charge, but the resistance is too high. I pour my last liter of wastewater onto the grounding rod terminal in the corner of the room. It hisses and steams. The seismic pulse grows stronger. The wave amplitude on the scope doubles. They are entering the red zone, within 1 kilometer. I can distinguish multiple sources now, not one vehicle. 2, maybe 3 lighter ones. Buggies. The heavy thud is a support truck. They are moving in a phalanx formation. This is a raiding party. The collectors. They strip tech, batteries and copper. They don't leave survivors because survivors come back for their gear. I unlock the drawer containing the .38 revolver. I place it on the desk. I also take out a flare gun. If I fire a flare inside the storm, the magnesium light will reflect off the white salt cloud, creating a blinding sphere of light that might disorient them for seconds. I make a decision to break silence. Not to call for help, there is no one to hear, but to jam their local comms. If they are communicating between vehicles, they are likely using low-power VHF handhelds. I patch my high-power HF rig into a dummy load, then bypass the filter to create harmonic distortion. I tune to the common VHF frequencies. I key the microphone and tape the button down. I am broadcasting pure, unmodulated carrier wave at 100 watts. This will flood their receivers with silence. If they try to talk, they will hear nothing but the crushing weight of my signal. It is a denial of service attack in the physical realm. The transmitter tubes glow brighter, pushed to their limit. The physical strain of the stress is manifesting. My vision is tunneling. I realize I haven't breathed properly in minutes. I force a tactical breathing rhythm. Inhale 4 counts, hold 4, exhale 4, hold 4. The shaking in my hands subsides slightly. I need steady hands. I begin to disconnect the sensitive receiver modules. If they breach, I cannot let them have the encryption keys or the frequency logs. I pull the hard drives from the old laptop. I have a hammer ready. Data destruction is the final protocol. Saving the data was my original sin. Destroying it might be my redemption. I place the drives on the concrete floor block. The wind shifts. The roar changes pitch, becoming a shriek. The storm eye is passing near. For a moment, the visibility might clear. I rush to the periscope. Through the swirling white dust, I see a shape. It is dark, angular, and unnatural. A vehicle chassis, modified with roll cages and spikes. It is parked just at the edge of the salt island, maybe 300 meters away. They have stopped. They are waiting out the peak of the wind before dismounting. I see movement on the back of the vehicle. A figure in heavy rags and goggles is struggling with a pintle-mounted object. A machine gun? A harpoon? It looks like a directional antenna. They are trying to triangulate the source of my jamming signal. I realize my mistake. By jamming them, I confirmed my active presence. I have turned myself from a suspected ruin into an active combatant. The figure on the vehicle points directly at my container. They have a fix. The element of surprise is gone. Now it is a siege. I cut the transmission immediately. The sudden silence on the band must be jarring for them. I hope it confuses them. Did the generator fail? Did the operator flee? I want them to hesitate. Every second of hesitation is a second the storm can worsen and cover my tracks if I need to run. But there is nowhere to run. The salt flat is a death sentence on foot. I hear a new sound above the wind, a metallic clank against the outer hull. Something has hit the container. A grappling hook? A rock? I freeze. I look at the seismic scope. The spikes are sharp and erratic now. Footsteps. They are on the island. They are walking on the rock and cactus ground, not the salt. The sound is different, harder, crunchier. They are flanking. I count 4 distinct sets of footsteps. They are moving professionally, spreading out to cover the exits. One is approaching the ventilation stack. If they block it, the generator dies. If they drop a grenade down it, I die. I scramble to the vent intake inside. I have a steel plate prepared for this. I slide it over the opening and bolt it down. The air inside the container immediately begins to stale. The generator chugs, starved of oxygen. I have to kill it before it stalls and seizes. I flip the kill switch. The lights die. The silence returns, but this time it is filled with the noises of men outside. I can hear shouting, muffled by the storm and the steel. Abre! Sabemos que estás ahí. Open up. We know you're there. The voice is rough, distorted by a mask. I do not answer. I sit in the dark, gripping the revolver. They start working on the door. I hear the screech of a pry bar digging into the gap between the frame and the steel. My welds are holding, but the metal is groaning. They are testing the defenses. I wait for them to grab the handle. I have the capacitor switch in my left hand. I need them to make solid contact. I watch the door latch. It moves slightly. Someone is gripping it, trying to rattle it open. Now, I flip the switch. Snap. A loud electrical crack, like a whip. A scream from outside, guttural and shocked. Then the sound of a body hitting the ground heavy. Mierda! Está electrificado! The attack pauses. They drag the injured man away. I can hear them retreating a few meters. They are regrouping. I check the capacitor bank voltage. It has discharged completely. It will take time to recharge. Time I don't have. That was my one non-lethal deterrent. Next comes fire. I smell something burning. They are not trying to pry the door anymore. They are using a thermal lance or a torch on the hinges. The smell of melting steel begins to seep into the cabin. It is a sharp, acrid smoke. The temperature near the door is rising. I see a glowing orange spot appearing on the metal frame. They are cutting their way in. I have one tactical advantage left. The RF overload. The antenna feed line enters through a port above the desk. If I bypass the tuner and dump the raw output of the battery bank into the antenna ground system, I can create a massive electrical arc at the base of the antenna outside, right where they are clustered. It won't electrocute them, but the flash and the acoustic shockwave of the arc will be like a flashbang grenade. It will also destroy my radio permanently. It is a suicide move for the station. I look at the tubes one last time. They have been my only company for years. I am sorry, old friends. I reconfigure the wiring. I disconnect the coaxial safety ground. I bridge the main 48-volt bus bars directly to the antenna counterpoise. I am essentially short-circuiting a massive battery bank through the earth they are standing on. I need a trigger. I strip the ends of 2 heavy-gauge wires. I will touch them together manually. This is reckless. I put on thick rubber lineman's gloves. My heart is hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The orange spot on the door is growing. Molten metal drips onto the floor inside. Sizzle. I wait until the cutting torch stops. They are about to kick the door in. The hinges are slag. I hear the heavy boot hit the steel. Wham! The door shudders but holds on the deadbolts. Wham! The top bolt gives way. The door bends. I can see a slice of the white storm outside. I see a figure raising a shotgun. I touch the wires together. The result is instantaneous and violent. A blinding blue-white flash erupts outside the viewport. The sound is not a boom, but a crack that shakes the fillings in my teeth. The current dumps into the wet, salty ground, vaporizing the moisture instantly. The explosion of steam and electrical arcing outside creates chaos. I hear screaming, confusion. The shotgun blasts blindly into the air. The feedback loop fries the electronics in the bunker. The lights blow out. The radio tubes shatter from the thermal shock. I am in total darkness, ears ringing, choking on ozone and smoke. But the door is not opening. They have pulled back, terrified by the lightning I just summoned. I have bought myself minutes, maybe 5, maybe 10. I grab the survival pack. I grab the revolver. I grab the hard drives. I move to the escape hatch. It is a floor panel concealed under the rug, leading to a narrow crawl space that exits into the dry leach field of the septic system, 30 meters away behind a cactus ridge. It is a tight squeeze. I have to crawl on my belly through salt slush and waste. It is humiliating and foul. I push the hatch up. The smell of sewage hits me. I lower the bag. I take one last look at the ruined station. The orange glow of the cut door frame illuminates the dead radio. Ojos de Sal is blind. Hertz is signing off. I crawl. The tunnel is tight, claustrophobic. The salt scrapes my elbows raw. I can hear the vibrations of the men above me, stomping in the bunker, realizing it is empty. They are smashing everything in frustration. I hear glass breaking. I hear the crash of the heavy equipment being overturned. I keep crawling. The tunnel slopes upward. I reach the exit grate. I push it gently. It is covered in sand. I have to dig my way out. My fingers bleed. Finally, I breach the surface. The wind is still howling, but the visibility is slightly better. I am behind them. I see the bunker from the outside for the first time in months. It looks like a rusty coffin. The buggies are parked in front. The raiders are inside, looting. I could run. The desert is wide. But I see something on the back of their lead truck. It is a cage. And inside the cage, huddled against the cold, is a child. A girl, maybe 10 years old. She is looking directly at me, through the storm, as if she knew I would emerge from the ground. She is not crying. She is waiting. The logic of survival says run. The logic of humanity says stay. I check the revolver. 5 rounds. There are 4 men inside the bunker. Maybe a driver left in the truck. The math is bad, but I have the element of surprise, and I have the storm. I holster the weapon. I need a distraction. I look at the fuel drums stored near the generator shed. If I can puncture one and ignite it, the fire will draw them out. But the wind is blowing away from the truck. It won't work. I have to get closer. I have to become the ghost they fear. I move through the cactus field using the noise of the wind to mask my steps. The salt crunching under my boots is lost in the gale. I reach the rear of the truck. The driver is there, asleep or passed out, slumped over the wheel. I creep past him. I approach the cage. The girl watches me. Her eyes are dark, intense. She holds up a finger to her lips. Shh. She points to the roof of the truck. There is a turret I missed. An automated sentry gun. No, a man wrapped in a tarp, watching the horizon. He missed me because I came from the ground. I am trapped. If I move, the sentry sees me. If I stay, the raiding party returns. I look at the girl. She reaches through the bars and hands me something small and cold. It is a spark plug. She points to the fuel tank of the truck. She understands sabotage. She is not a prisoner. She is a survivor. I take the plug. I understand. I crawl under the chassis of the truck. I locate the fuel line. I don't need to explode it. I just need to kill the engine. I use the metal tip of the plug to loosen the clamp on the fuel filter. Diesel begins to drip, drip, drip. I back away, retreating into the white void. I cannot save her now, not without getting us both killed. But if their truck dies 10 miles out, the desert will level the playing field. I will track them. I will hunt them in the silence. I merge into the storm. becoming a shadow in the white. I am no longer the signalman. I am the static. I am tracking the diesel trail. In the blinding whiteness of the storm, the fuel spill looks like a vein of black blood opened on a pristine sheet. The wind is relentless, pushing against me with the force of a solid wall, but the adrenaline keeps the cold at bay for now. I find the truck 3 miles out. It is dead. The engine seized when the fuel line ran dry, and the brutal cold gelled whatever diesel remained in the lines. The vehicle is a dark scar on the horizon. I approach with the revolver drawn, but there is no movement. The doors are open. The cabin is empty. The raiders abandoned the vehicle when the heater failed. They have tried to walk back to the bunker, back to the only heat source they know. They are circling back to my tomb. I flank them. The salt flat is my chessboard. I know the treacherous spots where the crust is thin and breaks into brine pits. I move wide, giving the truck a wide berth. I see the footprints of the men, heavy, stumbling drag marks in the snow-like salt dust. They are disoriented. The viento blanco kills by removing all reference points. Up becomes down. North becomes nowhere. They are walking in a slow spiral, unknowingly tightening the noose around themselves. I do not see the girl's footprints. I check the ground again. There are 4 sets of heavy boot prints, no small shoes. She is not with them. Did they leave her in the truck? I double back to the vehicle, risking exposure. The cage is empty. The bars are bent outward. She didn't escape. She was released, or she walked through the metal. I return to the bunker. The storm covers my approach. The door hangs on one hinge, groaning like a dying animal in the wind. The interior is a scene of violation. The wind has drifted salt deep into the room, covering the floor, the desk, the sleeping cot in a fine white powder. It looks like the room has been frozen in time for a century. The raiders never made it back here. The desert swallowed them. I am the sole occupant of the ruin. I step over the debris of my life. My logs are scattered. The photo of my team is face down in the brine. I pick it up. The faces are bleached white by the salt exposure. My priority is the transmitter. The raiders smashed the glass facing, but the core components of the tube array are surprisingly resilient. They survived the arc flash because I disconnected the main feed in time. I have to restore the signal. It is not a rational imperative. It is a biological need. I cannot die in silence. I need to close the loop. I pull the emergency repair kit from under the floorboards. My hands are black with frostbite at the fingertips. I can barely feel the screwdriver. I have to use my palms to turn the tool. The pain is distant. A dull data input that I choose to ignore. I bypass the safety interlocks. I am wiring the batteries directly to the oscillator. The generator is dead, so I rely on the last dregs of the chemical battery bank. The voltage is sagging, 21 volts and dropping. It is enough for one low-power transmission. I set the frequency to the universal calling channel. I do not want to talk to anyone. I do not want to be rescued. I want to occupy the frequency. I want to deny the silence its victory. I connect the Morse keyer. The mechanism is jammed with grit. I clean it with my own saliva. The click is crisp. Click-clack. It is the heartbeat of the station. I program the automatic keyer. I punch in the sequence. It is not an SOS. It is a status update. CQ, calling all stations. This is Ojos de Sal. I set the message to repeat. Variable. Silence. Status. Gone. I watch the needles on the output meter. They dance rhythmically. The signal is weak, barely a whisper in the RF spectrum. But it is there. It will bounce off the ionosphere. It will travel over the dead cities and the silent forests. It will reach the receivers of the other ghosts in the network. They will know that the node is active, but the operator is absent. The machine speaks for me now. The separation between man and equipment is complete. As the machine hums, I hear it again. The lung signal. It is not coming from the radio speaker. The speaker is disconnected. The sound is coming from the salt itself. It is a vibration traveling up through the floor, through the soles of my boots, into my skeleton. It is a breathing rhythm. Inhale. Exhale. I look at the oscilloscope I left running on the auxiliary battery. The line is reacting, but the inputs are unplugged. The scope is reading the ambient electrostatic field of the room. The room is breathing. I realize the girl didn't bend the bars. The metal bent itself. The physics here are wrong. The solitude has eroded the barrier between the mind and the matter. I am preparing to leave. There is no food. The water filter is shattered. The temperature is dropping to lethal levels as the storm eye passes and the night vacuum returns. I could curl up in the corner and freeze. It would be efficient, but the breathing pulls me. It is calling from the horizon, the place where the salt meets the sky. I zip up my jacket, though the zipper teeth are stripped. I put on my goggles. One lens is cracked. I take the logbook. I place it on the center of the desk, weighted down by a chunk of pure halite. This is the black box. If you are reading this, the experiment failed, or perhaps it succeeded. I step out of the airlock. The wind has stopped. The silence is absolute. It is a heavy physical pressure on the eardrums. The moon has risen, turning the salar into a glowing silver ocean. I can see for miles. There are no trucks, no bodies, no footprints of the raiders. The salt has scrubbed the world clean. There is only one set of tracks. They are small, child-sized. They lead away from the bunker, straight towards the magnetic north. They do not sink into the crust. They rest on top of it. I align my boots with them. I will follow the signal to the source. The bunker is behind me now. I can hear the faint, high-pitched whine of the transmitter tubes drifting on the thin air. It is a comforting sound, a lullaby of voltage. I do not look back. The cold is no longer painful. It is just a state of being. My legs move mechanically. I am simply a carrier wave seeking a receiver. The horizon is getting closer, or perhaps I am expanding to meet it. The white ground and the white sky are merging into a single frequency. I am tuning out. End of log.